raucous UHY Center packed for Kids Day. The first sold-out crowd for the women in 6 seasons.
You guys excited?
Yeah!
Well, we're now a week into 2025, and the Siena men have already proven of what they're showing for the year ahead. The double overtime thriller in Manhattan was incredible and something to smile about, plus they had already won against Cornell to close out non-conference action. The women, meanwhile, a little bit of a lukewarm week due to some issues, including Anijah Jackson getting injured and eventually recovering, as well as a trip down to the city, which they split, winning over Manhattan, but losing to Iona. Well, it was the men's turn to play Iona, and it was their first meeting against the Gales for the season over at MVP Arena. And the Iona team this year, not the best. It's funny, because Iona is usually the MAAC team that you would think wins it all, because they have in the past few years. They've had stellar teams over the years, including ones coached by Jerry Welsh, Tim Cluse, and, of course, the great Rick Pitino. The Pitino-era Iona was brief, but still impactful. They went to the March Madness tournament twice, as well as a NIT run, which was only because they lost at the buzzer to Ryder. However, eventually, come 2023, Pitino gets the coaching job at St. John's, and they bring on a guy named Tobin Anderson. And let's talk about Tobin Anderson, because his resume is colorful. The 53-year-old is from Truro, Iowa, originally, and he goes from Iowa over to the Northeast to go to college, playing at Wesleyan for 4 years, and then getting his master's degree at Florida State. From there, he landed some head coaching jobs, including ones at Clarkson and Hamilton College, and in 2011, he was the assistant coach at Siena College under head coach Mitch Bonaguro. Eventually, when Bonaguro was fired, Anderson left with him, and he eventually went back down to the smaller rankings. He got a lot of attention over at St. Thomas Aquinas, a small school down in the southern portion of New York State, and that got him a head coaching job over at Fairleigh Dickinson University in 2022, his first at the Division I level. Well, at Fairleigh Dickinson, he rescued a program that only had 4 wins in their past season, and from there, went to March Madness and brought them into a tournament which they weren't supposed to go to. No, MAAC was supposed to go to the tournament that year, but because of NCAA regulations, they couldn't go yet, because they were still making the transition to Division I. So instead, Tobin Anderson and his squad go to the first 4 and win there, and then they eye Purdue, a number 1 seed, for the first round.
The more I watch Purdue, the more I think we can beat them. Yes, sir. Let's go shock the world. Let's go do this.
And then Tobin Anderson proved the unthinkable by beating Purdue by 5 points, sending Purdue into the postseason again for the 3rd year in a row after the first round.
That hole had to be 2 feet wide. I mean, it was huge just there. Jason said he heard screaming, a lot of expletives in the locker room as Purdue walked off the court, and then a big bang.
Eventually, Purdue had a strong run in the 2024 tournament, getting as far as the Final Four. Meanwhile, Anderson impressed the league enough to get hired as the head coach over at Iona. And in his first season, he ended up splitting wins and losses with a team that mostly consisted of graduate students and freshmen. However, in the era of the transfer portal, Iona had an entirely new breed of players. Many of them not from the area, not familiar with Division I level, except for a guy named Clarence Rupert, who played at St. Peter's when they went to March Madness in 2022. Eventually, Rupert left to go to a different school before heading back to the MAAC for his final year of eligibility. All right, enough talking about Iona, because unfortunately, Gerry McNamara could not get past Tobin Anderson here. And it was a controversial decision that led the Saints to a 1-point loss, 74-73, under the Gales. There were 47 personal fouls for the players, 49 turnovers, another high number one there. And our friend Adam Jai of Iona was the one that decided the score at the free throw line.
Jai, top of the key with 5. Jai, stutter step, gets past Coyle. Jai hangs in the air, and a blocking foul will put Jai at the line with 3 seconds left. Was he in the circle? Was Doty in the circle? He was not, but
was he ever so slightly still moving to his left?
It'll put Adam Jai at the line, a 62% free throw shooter. 1 make gives Iona the lead. Siena does have a timeout.
There were also a lot of other controversial decisions, including notable physical contact between the players, as well as decisions on where the ball should go and who catches the ball. And our friend Brendan Coyle, on a more positive note, career-high 20 points for the guy, and Justice Schultz had 14 of 16 points in the second half. And at the end of the game, Gavin Doty comes on as per usual, 3 consecutive steals for the freshman, and then converted a three-pointer to put the Saints within a tie before the Iona free throw line decision was made. And as for our friend Clarence Rupert, which we just talked about earlier, he had 12 points. Justin Menard had 11 for the Gales, who were also leading the Saints at rebounds. And it was also the second time the Saints lost in a one-point decision in MAAC play, which just shows you how competitive the league is. And that's not sarcasm, because any of the scores could be chosen at any time by either one of the schools. And in a team with a very, very strong history with Siena, this was the 126th time the Saints played the Gales overall, it was bound to happen. And another thing that didn't go the Saints' way, and it's sort of a what-if kind of scenario, because you wonder, what it could have been like if he had played. Marcus Jackson, unfortunately, went under with a serious injury that looked like he rolled his ankle. Jackson was helped off the court by trainer Eric Lundstrom. Good job on him. He does a lot of wonders for the men's team and is an unsung hero. And he didn't return. He was not even on the bench for the rest of the game. Overall, the Iona Gales are still leading the series against the Saints 71-54. In recent years, this series has been competitive and fairly split. When Rick Pitino was coach, as a matter of fact, both of his visits to MVP Arena resulted in the Saints' victory, including a notable 53-70 win in 2023, and in 2022 when the Saints stormed the court following their victory over Pitino there. And usually Siena would play Iona in the annual Gold Rush game, but I don't know, maybe just due to some scheduling conflicts, or maybe because Iona hasn't been doing that well lately, they decided to not have it be the Gold Rush game. That's going to be against St. Peter's of all schools, which makes no sense because the Peacocks are not gold. Again, either team could have won, and it was kind of like the Niagara game, where the Saints had some chances at the end but could not connect, could not build. And this is just how the MAAC games usually are. There's a lot of close contests and a lot of chances to win and a lot of chances to lose. At least the Saints are trying, though, because obviously there is that. The defensive backcourt is still a machine, and the Saints are awake at the defense line. The offense line has been getting some work lately, which is great. And maybe the Saints made a New Year's resolution to be more competitive this year. Who knows? All right, on to the women, and it was time once again for the annual Kids Day event. Every year, the Siena women play a game in front of a crowd of elementary school and middle schoolers. And this year was their first sold-out crowd in 6 seasons. You're looking at the amount of schools that made the trip over to Loudonville. There's quite the few of them, including the ones that made the trip all the way up from Voorheesville, which is not too far from where I live, so that's an impressive drive right there. The Siena women were hoping to play their best selves in front of a sold-out crowd, but unfortunately, they chose to play against the top team in the MAAC right now, the Quinnipiac Bobcats. Much like the men, the women also took on Quinnipiac, which is currently number 1 in a lock for the MAAC polls right now, and Trisha Fabry and her squad unfortunately bested the Saints in a game that ended in a blowout towards the very end. The score, 69-51. The women were still hot, though. Combined 40 points for Anaja Brown and Anaja Jackson, 22 for Jackson, 18 for Anaja. Unfortunately, Teresa Sapala wasn't able to recreate the success she had last week. She still was very good on the defensive end. Team high 9 defensive rebounds, as well as 2 steals. But unfortunately, she wasn't able to get past the strong backbone that Quinnipiac has. As for the Bobcats, it was Carson Martin who scored the most, 14 points, 85% shooting range. She also had 5 rebounds and 3 steals and assists. Gal Raviv and Jackie Grisdale both had 13, and our key player of the game was Anna Foley, who had 10 points and 5 assists. And just to show you how much of a tall order Quinnipiac's roster is, Anna Foley is 6'3". They also have 6'3" Ella O'Donnell, who is from Ireland. 5'9" Gal Raviv, who's from Israel and played for Team Israel overseas last year. Carson Martin, who is 5'7", 5'9" Jackie Grisdale, and the 6'1" Reagan Sipla, who's also a first year. And their big center, Khadijah Tungo, who is 6'6". Get out. The Saints were competitive at the very beginning of the game. The highest lead for either team was just 4 points. After halftime, the Saints went on an 8-0 run. However, Quinnipiac responded with one of their own. And from there, the lead got as far as 20. Before the Quinnipiac game, however, Terry Primm did get a shot in the arm he needed badly. And it was a new player that Teresa Sapala had some help in inking. Her name is Pepi Loco. She is 6'2", and she is from Lahti, Finland. Unfortunately, Loco did not have any points during the game, but she did get 5 rebounds. I already did a coach profile for the video, but a little bit about Trisha Fabry. This is her 30th season as the coach at Quinnipiac University. She joined when the team was still at the Division II level. And of course, your boy had the honor of working the Kids' Day game. It was fun watching the wee ones run around and watch them huddle around in their seats. Of course, they love being on camera, so at every commercial break, we got to aim the camera at some random fan that's just dancing around, singing along to the songs that the DJ's playing. There was also a few times where they did some stopping and jumping around on the seats, which caused the cameras to look very shaky while we were moving them around, but we have no control over that. The gym was a ginormous mess by the time I came back in to take the cameras down, and let's not forget that it was absolutely a minefield trying to navigate through there, and we had no backdrop for the commentators as a result, because just try to imagine carrying that ginormous hunk past a bunch of kids who are smaller than that thing, and you could pretty much be a battering ram knocking them over. And look, I mean, they do it for the fans, but the Siena women knew that this was going to be a tough task to play against the number one team in the MAAC right now, and thankfully they get a bye weekend coming up, so they get to decompress and rejuvenate themselves when they go back into action next Thursday.
Before we go back over to the men, here are some musical chairs.
I also want to talk about Brendan Coyle because he was recently awarded the Leo and Janine Dufort Student Athlete of the Month, an annual award that Siena gets every month. They were the final ones for the year of 2024, him and Teresa Sapala. Coyle has a 3.92 GPA, and he also made the president's list this past spring. Now at 3.68, he had a breakout season under Gerry McNamara, and he's looking to improve once again. Meanwhile, Teresa Sapala, her GPA is 3.85, made the dean's list, right now with 3.41 is her GPA. She's also a member of the All-MAAC academic team, and also a two-time member of the MAAC honor roll. And now she's currently at 19.6 points per game, which is amazing. The Siena men had some good news heading into the Quinnipiac game about Marcus Jackson. They provided an update on his injury later in the week. Jackson ended up hurting his MCL, and thankfully he will only be out for a few weeks. Then it was the men's turn to play Quinnipiac, and as I said before, because of the way the MAAC does the schedule this year, if the women are playing one team at home, the men are playing the same team away. This does not look like my bedroom. No, that's because it's Quinnipiac. Yeah, they built this ginormous arena atop of a hill right by their campus to house both their hockey matches and their basketball matches. There's also a hockey game going on at the same time as this. Yeah, I had the honor of going to the game and watching it in person. I went to go visit family, and my cousin Charlie actually made the trip with me.
Charlie, thoughts on the game?
What?
Thoughts on the game?
No thoughts at all.
I agree with him. I was absolutely speechless as well because the Saints unfortunately did not have a lot to show for the game against the preseason MAAC champion. The Saints unfortunately lost to the Bobcats by 19 points, but it could have been a lot worse. The Saints started the very game with Quinnipiac scoring notably over them 8-0, and when the Saints finally got going, it was too late. The Bobcats eventually led them by 22. At one point during the game, it was Siena 2, Quinnipiac 24. The Saints were scoreless for 7 minutes. It was even crazier considering the fact that the Bobcats were 12th worst nationally in field goal percentage. But they didn't show it this game. They shot 59% in the opening stanza and rebounding the Saints 22-7. The halftime lead was 15-43. Gerry McNamara understandably was irate, as many of the Siena fans, including myself, were watching the game. The Saints did show up during the second half, though. Major Freeman, of course, banking on the threes, tried to cut the deficit down to 15.
And that time you saw 3 green shirts in the paint fighting for the rebound.
Freeman 0 for 4 and held scoreless in the first half, knocking down the 3. Shot clock at 4. Schultz against Monroe. Got a little opening there. Gives for Freeman, who knocks down the three-pointer as the shot clock went off.
The best Siena play of the game, arguably, was when Justice Schultz dunked the ball in at 11:27 to go.
Justice Schultz comes in with the Friday night slam. The junior put up 16 points and 6 rebounds.
And the Quinnipiac Bobcats were also a MAAC team that was not hurt by the transfer portal. Oh yeah, there have been some players that left, but they still had Amari Monroe, Paul Otieno, and Savion Lewis returning from last season, as well as Richie Springs, who notably played for the UConn national champion team in 2023 before transferring. Paul and Amari both had double-doubles, with the latter having 16 points, 10 rebounds, and 4 steals, and the former having 12, 10, and 5 blocks. Quinnipiac is also now on a 4-win streak over the Saints. Thankfully, however, the Saints will have a chance to rematch against the Bobcats again over in Albany later in the season. Aside from the dunk, Justice Schultz also had 100 collegiate steals, a new milestone that he reached with the Quinnipiac game. Justice Schultz and Major Freeman were the only ones in double figures for the Saints that day. And I think what also did the Saints was something that Quinnipiac considered when they were watching tape, probably. If you look here on the footage, you can see that Schultz is being contained by 2 Quinnipiac people. And that was pretty much the defensive strategy the Bobcats had going into the game. They knew what they were in for with Justice Schultz, and they wanted to have some justice themselves. All right, time for the MAAC report. The latest scores from Week 9 of competition, starting off with the Rider men and a close loss to the Manhattan Jaspers, 79-80. And now, for the big reveal, the ultimate shocker, Canisius finally winning a game. Yeah, that's right. The Golden Griffins took down the Rider Broncs in what was the MAAC basement battle. Canisius and Rider were among the lowest places in the MAAC currently at the time the game was played. Canisius was victorious 85-67. After playing Rider, Manhattan played Mount St. Mary's. They ended up losing 66-75. St. Peter's getting a bye and playing Niagara over in Western New York, losing 60-70. Aside from winning Rider, before that, Canisius unfortunately extended their losses to 14, with a loss to Sacred Heart in a high-scoring game, 99-82. The Fairfield Stags playing against the Iona Gales, closely winning over them. And before beating Siena, Quinnipiac lost to Marist, which is currently undefeated in MAAC competition. Merrimack and Sacred Heart, the 2 new MAAC teams, playing each other. And in an interesting turn of events, they just beat Sacred Heart. 66-65, the final score. It was a game that could have ended either way. Aside from the loss to Manhattan, Mount St. Mary's did beat Niagara, 68-62, and Iona played Siena, as we just mentioned earlier in the video. Meanwhile, on the women's side of things, the Rider women, crazy week this week. They first played the Canisius Golden Griffins, losing 43-63, and then they beat Niagara by 20 points. The Manhattan women getting both wins this week, first over Mount St. Mary's, 75-47, and then a win over Merrimack, 77-61. The St. Peter's women, much like the men, playing against both Western New York teams, they easily beat Niagara 80-50, and also beat Canisius 61-55. That win was much closer. The Fairfield women, no surprise, also winning over both Iona and Marist. And the Quinnipiac women, aside from their Siena victory, also getting a victory over the Iona Gales, 66-58. Merrimack women also played Sacred Heart, winning over them, 64-53, and then Sacred Heart also played against Mount St. Mary's, and Mount St. Mary's was victorious, 75-51. Let's go back over to the Canisius men getting their first victory of the season. The win over Rider was a home game, and it was the first under head coach Jim Christian, and also their first win since March of 2024 when they went to the second round in the MAAC tournament. The Canisius player who scored the most points in that game was Paul McMillan IV, who was their leading scorer. How about this stat for you? This was the first time since January of 2020 where Canisius
scored a game by shooting 60% or better from the field. The team they beat that time? Ryder.
And now that we're full on in MAAC League play, we get to talk about the Players of the Week honors for both the men's and women's sides of the team. First off, let's talk about the women. Teresa Sapala, as expected, Hercules Tires Metro Atlantic Athletic Conference Player of the Week. She willed the Siena offense, averaging over 25 points per game, 52% shooting from the floor, 44% from the three, and also 12-12 from the line over 3 games. And against Cornell, she had a career high of 31 points. Meanwhile, for the Bobcats, Gal Raviv had the other award. She is the Rookie of the Week. She is actually from Kadima, Israel, and played for the Israeli national team this past summer. Against St. Peter, she had 12 points, and over Marist, 16. Meanwhile, the MAAC rankings extend over to the men's side as well, with Gavin Doty getting the award. He is the Rookie of the Week, and why not? He's had a stellar performance, helping late in the games when the Saints need him most. Doty's had the sense of urgency that a lot of people can expect from a rookie player. And also joining Doty is Tanner Thomas, the big man over from Sacred Heart. Thanks to their 99-82 victory over Canisius, he has a season-high 24 points and 11 rebounds to come with him. Something the Saints will have to look out for because they have Sacred Heart on tap next week.
All right, we're heading into the 10th week of competition now. The men and women will not only be playing identical schedules, but they will also be playing on the same days, January 16th and January 18th. The men will be hosting Sacred Heart, while the women will be at Sacred Heart, and then they swap. MAAC will be making the trip over to Loudonville, while the men will be making the trip over to Andover. This will be the only time Siena will play MAAC this season, as the MAAC is now playing an unbalanced schedule. The Sacred Heart game should be interesting. The men will be reunited against former Saint Aiden Carpenter, who knows like nobody on the team because they had all transferred or graduated. And also the MAAC team will be a challenge for the Saints because they are currently second place in the MAAC. As for the women, both games should also be doable. Hopefully Terry Primm's team can get some momentum going, and we'll see how well they do come Thursday.
All right, to close us out, we're going to hear from Frank Ambrose, who is the founder of Saints March On, Siena's NIL collective. He had the honor of being on the show with Robert Lee and Kelly O'Donnell at the Iona game to talk a little bit about his initiative at halftime.
Well, I mean, as an 85 graduate, I got to see this program grow, and I want to see us back competing for championships on a regular basis. I mean, the fans deserve it, the program deserves it, and we have so much potential. I want us to take full advantage of it and help along the way.
There's so much talk about NIL and collectives. You know, let's dumb it down a little bit for folks who are out there maybe looking to support Siena. They love Siena. They went to Siena. How specifically does NIL help Siena student athletes?
No, it helps them in a number of different ways. You know, the whole college model is now moving towards a professional model. So our program at a Division I level needs to be competing at that. So it's going to give Gerry and Terry Primm and other coaches an opportunity to retain, recruit. Now we can get into recruiting as well. And stable. You know, everybody complains about the transfer portal. It gives us a little bit of a hedge against the transfer portal. Now, it's tough for programs like us to compete against the Power Fives, but that's not what we're really trying to do. We're trying to get ourselves at that mid-major level and compete at that level.